So today I will give you the second introductory lecture that will explain you some basic facts about the brain anatomy and also cognitive neuroimaging methods that will be used in our course. So this lecture will help you to understand the results of the neuroeconomic studies. So during the whole course, we will focus on the neurobiological mechanisms of decision making. And to be honest, this is a very complex task. And first of all, because the brain is a very complex device. So brain consists of billions of neurons, and each neuron has thousands of connections. So altogether, it makes the most complex device in the universe. Some neuroscientists are really skeptical whether we can really fully understand this system, but other neuroscientists are more optimistic. So brain consists of various cells, and first of all, consists of neurons. The neuron is a basic unit of the brain. As you remember, neuron consists of the cell body, of dendrites, and of the axon. So dendrites accumulate information from other neurons and from sensory organs. Soma, or the cell body, integrates this information and produces the action potential. And action potential propagates the axon and induce some neuromediators to the synaptic cleft and activate the next neuron or, for example, the muscle. So if we will simply slice the brain, we will see immediately a large difference between gray and white matter. So gray matter consists of cell bodies, and most of the neuroeconomic studies focus on the gray matter, on the human cortex. So white matter consists of axons. So basically, white matter consists of connections between different brain regions. Anyway, if we will make a closer look inside of the white matter, we will find some small clusters of neurons, so-called nuclei. So for example, the nucleus accumbens is a very important area for decision making. Nucleus accumbens, or sometimes we call this region ventral striatum, the lower portion of striatum, is critical for the evaluation of the expected values for the option during the decision making. So sometimes we will also focus on some brain regions inside of the brain. How to navigate within this very complex system? So if you would really like to know more about the neuroanatomy, about the methods used in neuroeconomics, I strongly recommend you to read more specialized books. So some nice books are available. For example, this book on cognitive neuroscience is a nice review of basic facts and human neuroanatomy and also cognitive neuroscience methods. Today, I will only give you some very basic facts that you need for this course. So we can divide brain in 4 major regions. For example, into the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. During this course, we will focus on the frontal lobe. So a lot of really important brain areas are localized in the frontal lobe, and these brain areas are involved into the decision making. So you have to remember that each region in the brain has own label. For example, each sulcus, each gyrus has their own name. For example, central sulcus, precentral gyrus, postcentral gyrus. But we will not use these labels during this course. So instead, we will use a more abstract way to label different brain regions. For example, we will use dorsal ventral dimension to localize brain regions. This dimension this axis refers to animal's anatomy. So dorsal means closer to the back, ventral closer to the belly. Since our anatomy is slightly different from the standard animal anatomy, in our brain, dorsal means the upper portion of the brain, and ventral means the lower portion of the brain. So when I will talk you about the ventral striatum, it means this is a lower part of the structure called striatum. So I will use these labels quite a lot during the course. Another important axis is medial lateral axis. Medial means closer to the central plane of the brain, and lateral means closer to the outer surface of the hemispheres. So, for example, medial cortex represent the inner surface of the hemispheres. Another important label that will be often used in this course is orbital cortex. So orbital cortex means the cortex localized above our eyes. So when I'm talking to you about the orbital cortex, it means I refer to the cortex localized just above our eyes. So when you will make a look to some regions in the prefrontal cortex, you can notice dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. We will discuss this region quite a lot. This region is involved into the self-control, into the rational decision-making. So dorsolateral means the specific location in the brain. We will also discuss orbitofrontal cortex. And orbitofrontal cortex is a cortex above our eyes. So this scheme summarizes the key areas in our frontal cortex that are involved into the decision-making. Orbitofrontal cortex, the cortex above our eyes. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, cortex on the outer surface of the hemispheres that is located in the upper portion of the brain. And ventromedial prefrontal cortex. This is a medial portion of the orbitofrontal cortex localized in the inner surface of the hemispheres. So let's quickly discuss how does brain process sensory information. So different brain areas are specialized in different sensory information. For example, occipital cortex is involved into the processing of the visual information. This is so-called visual cortex. So in the temporal cortex, we can find the auditory cortex. So if you would stimulate this brain region, you can evoke illusions of different sounds. So some brain areas are really specialized. Some brain areas are involved in different functions. So if you would be interested in the details of the sensory information processing by our brain, please read more specialized handbooks. So now I will give you the major metaphor of cognitive neuroscience that explains how does our brain process sensory information. So visual, for example, information first comes to our visual cortex. So first, our primary visual cortex, sometimes labeled as the area V1, processes very basic aspects of the visual information. So for example, these neurons, they react to their local contrast. So these neurons are kind of special spatial-temporal filters that are sensitive to the very basic aspects of the visual information. So next, information is transferred to the higher order visual cortex, for example, the area V4. And neurons in this area are sensitive to more complex patterns, so to more complex features of the visual information. And next, more higher order visual cortex is involved, and neurons in this area are sensitive to very complex patterns, for example, to faces. So visual information is processed step by step from very simple features to very complex features. So at the end, brain creates an image, a kind of internal model of the visual object. And neuroeconomics assumes that after this stage, the decision-making process takes place. So first, sensory evidences for different options are accumulated by the brain. And next, our brain makes decisions. It compares options and selects certain behavioral patterns. So overall, according to neuroeconomics theory, when we make a decision, when we make a selection between two options, first, our brain processes objects, and next, we make a decision. So at the next stage, decision-making neurons are processing the information and create and produce the decision. So let's now discuss the major methods used in neuroeconomics, methods that help us to understand neurobiological mechanisms of decision-making.